side by side, and then one, right, leading to one, and then one. And what these footprints are and how they were used is completely up to you. I mean, we don't really have a sense of, you know, of what they were used for. But I mean, you can kind of get a general sense, right? Again, these feet are about 97 centimeters long. For those of you who don't do metric, that's about 3 feet long. So they are huge. And you get a sense, right, that perhaps you have this divinity standing in the portico, right? You know, feet forward like this, and then taking 2 huge steps forward into the temple, and right, making their way to the back shrine, where they sort of live. Because again, these are houses of the gods. These are places where they are made manifest, and they come and even inhabit their statues. Hence the ability to come and interact with them and make them happy and productive. So a very interesting temple. This temple also gets a lot of attention because its proportions and layout are very similar to those that are mentioned in the Old Testament. The Old Testament describes the Temple of Solomon, the one that would have been on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem today, which of course is a very contentious site. It's never been excavated, and probably never will be excavated. The Dome of the Rock is currently on top of it. So those of you who know Jerusalem and that big golden dome, it's sacred in Islam because it's the site of the night journey. It's sacred in Judaism because it was a site of the temple. And after the temple's destruction, some of those stones went into the construction of the perimeter wall. And that's why the Wailing Wall is significant in Judaism. Sorry, the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. There's a shift away from calling it the Wailing Wall. It's a little pejorative, so apologies. But the Western Wall is supposedly made up of stones from this original temple, and that's why it's important. So the description, anyway, in the Old Testament of Solomon's temple is done in terms of an antechamber, a main cella where these sort of sacrifices would take place to the god Yahweh. And that temple is very, very similar to the one at Ayin Dara, and also contemporary with that temple too. The Ayin Dara temple was a little bit before, but for that reason, it's of a lot of interest to Old Testament scholars and biblical archaeologists. All right. So in addition to these Hittite states, we also see the emergence of a group of people known as the Arameans. And again, this is another group that we see emerge primarily by way of also we see texts in which they're mentioned, for one thing. They're known as the Alamu in the Amarna correspondence. They're kind of called wanderers. So again, a pastoral, nomadic people. They sound a lot like the Amorites, but these are the Arameans. They're important actually because Aramaean and Aramaic, right, becomes kind of the lingua franca of the Fertile Crescent during the later classical period. And actually, that language is still spoken today in parts of Syria by Syriac Christians. It's dying out, but it is still an active language. So aside from their language, we see these Aramaean rulers begin taking control of specific city-states, side by side, these Neo-Hittite rulers, sometimes working with them, sometimes coming into conflict with them. And in addition to that link with, the word Alamu, which kind of means wanderer in Egyptian, we see them mentioned in other texts as well, as being kind of, again, these wandering pastoral nomads. The use of the word bait, or bit, like as in bit halami, right? Bit or bait, or house, right? The house of such and such, for the use, for describing a kingdom, kind of refers to these patriarchal households, the house of David, for example, the house of Solomon. And indeed, Saul, David, Solomon, all of these guys in the Bible end up fighting the Arameans at different times. So we know them also from the biblical texts as well. Well, I'm just trying to think. We could go on to the site of Tel Halaf, but actually we only have 2 minutes. So why don't we hold on Tel Halaf for next time? When we get back to Assyria, we'll take a look at again how, in addition to the Neo-Hittites, the Aramaeans also had contributions that were appropriated and adopted by the Assyrians. And of course, the Assyrian way of saying thank you is to conquer and destroy you in the 7th century. So we'll get to that on Wednesday, and I'll see you guys then.